Today we're changing the alternator on this 2006 Mitsubishi Shogun 3.2 diesel. I've got a voltmeter, a test probe with a voltmeter in it. I'm just checking the battery with the engine off. This is a brand new battery, so we're seeing 13.1 volts. You'd expect to see above 12.5 volts on a good battery. I'm starting the engine, and if the alternator is working, the voltage should be around 14 or above. As you can see here, we've got less than the voltage with the engine switched off. So now we're going to check the voltage at the alternator just to check that there isn't a problem with the positive lead between the alternator and the battery. On this particular vehicle, we need to remove the airbox to gain adequate access to the alternator. So removing the intake pipe and the airbox. To remove the airbox, we need to remove the airbox lid and the air filter itself, which uncovers 3 10mm bolts. Now with the airbox removed, we've got a bit more room to get to the positive lead on the alternator. Now with the engine off, we're still seeing 13 volts, so we've got battery voltage at the alternator. And now with the engine switched on, we'll test it again. And the voltage is still battery voltage or below. So this does indicate that the alternator isn't working. To allow us a little bit of extra room to work, I'm removing this air pipe that goes to the turbo, or at least removing the turbo end and pushing it out of the way. There's a connector on the alternator that can't be removed because the wastegate is in the way. But obviously, before removing the electrical connectors, we need to disconnect the battery by removing the lead to the negative post. There's a 10mm on the front of the alternator, which is the top mount for it, and the 10mm at the back here is the adjustment bolt. So I'm going to remove this completely, get it out of the way. Now we've got the battery disconnected, we can remove the battery lead, which will have either a 12 or 13mm nut on the back of it. Now underneath the vehicle we have a 17mm nut on the end of a 22mm square head bolt, but we did get away without holding the bolt while removing. So I'm just undoing this 17mm nut that's on the end of it. A little bit difficult to show, but this is the end that you can see here. Just taking the nut off the end of the ball. And then pushing the bolt out of position. So as you can see here, the end of the bolt is a square head, and it would take a 22mm spanner if required. Now to get both of these belts off the pulley. Now I was hoping that with the adjustment, the adjuster itself completely removed, that this wouldn't be so difficult, but the belts did prove to be rather tricky to remove. So what I was having to do was pry them forward, so both the belts need to come forward, and at the same time turning the fan sprocket, or where the fan attaches, the fan pulley, so that it would drive the belt off. So as you can see, I've pulled the first belt off and the second belt into the first groove until I've managed to remove them completely. So now with the belt off completely, we can wiggle the alternator out of position. Now, being original, it is pretty well stuck on the bottom bracket. We can remove the electrical connector, now it's away from the wastegate, but the alternator did take some prying away from the bottom mounting point. I was struggling a little bit for space removing the alternator, so this boost pipe I disconnected and undid the bracket, although undoing the bolts for the bracket didn't actually make that much difference. Just getting the hose off the top made the most difference to access, and there is just about enough space to remove the alternator from the top. So checking the new and old alternator side by side, the only difference is the electrical connector is in a slightly different position on the new one, but this is a Lucas remanufactured part. Everything else is identical. So mounting this in position, loosely fitting the bolt at the bottom, not tightening, because we need to adjust the tension on the belts. Refit the adjuster on the top after fitting the belts, so we had a lot more room to get the new belts on. That was a lot easier. Leaving the bottom bolt loose, and we want to adjust the, if we're using the original belts, we'll want about 5mm of play in them. If we're using a new belt, these do tend to stretch, so you'll want to tension it and then check it again maybe a few days later. Once you've tensioned it, of course, don't forget to tighten all of the bolts, including the bottom one. refit the pipes that you've removed, and we're ready to reconnect the battery and check that the alternator is working. So 13 volts from the battery with the engine off. And now we've got a healthy 14.6 volts, so that's job done.